Hour number two of our program today, and I was just telling our guest we already have a question to start it out with because I think I mentioned just before the end of the show yesterday that we were going to have two guests in studio. Travis Rothweiler, of course, is the city manager in Twin Falls, but Nathan Murray has now joined the team over at City Hall, and he is the new director of economic development for the city. We were just talking off air. He is an Idaho native, but he spent some time working in Utah. But otherwise familiar with, I think, probably what are the needs of any community about this size, especially one that is growing so quickly. First of all, I'd like to welcome both of you to the show.
Thank you very much.
Hey,
And right off the top, I got an email yesterday. I was just joking about this off air. I mentioned the two of you were coming in yesterday. I walked to my desk as soon as I got off the air, and there was the first question. And and I was saying, I don't know if this is really economic development related. I guess it is because the more development, the more traffic you get. But a writer wanted to know, could we get more of the larger trucks off city streets and maybe find alternate routes for them? And I know that there are likely already some of these in place, but I thought that was an interesting question, maybe a good jumping off point today.
Yeah, so transportation always is going to be one of the cornerstones of any good economic development policy. One of the things that we are just starting the process is a fully fledged transportation plan. Our engineering department, which is led by Jackie Fields, is going to move forward this fall, and they're going to be building a revised version of the city's transportation plan. We have a transportation plan. We're going to go through an update and a process. And I know one of the things that has been on Jackie's list is to look at truck routes and the appropriate place to have a bypass, if you will, for trucks and heavy trucks kind of moving through our community. I think another important piece is that you'll never be able to remove all trucks from all of the roads because of the deliveries. But I think that if you could lessen the through traffic and place them onto certain areas, you might be able to do what the writer and the listener shared, and that is how do you lessen some of that burden that we're experiencing?
We almost have a beltway though that's developed, I think, on its own because you've got the interstate on one side, and then really with the growth that's gone on in the north and western sides, you have some streets there that can act in that sense too as well.
You do. You have Blue Lakes. You have not only Washington Street, but potentially as well as Eastland, and then some other beltways. But you also have Highway 30, which is really an important connector going off onto the interstate, as well as connecting over onto the bypass over to 93 as well.
Nathan, I guess your challenge is when it comes to looking at development, everyone knows there's not a lot of room left on the north side of the
hmm
city. I guess it's still room, but you now the challenge is, I guess, to attract people for the south side and maybe east side and some other areas, and to convince them that even though you may not have the canyon view, it's still a good place to do business.
yeah. So admittedly, I don't have as good a grasp yet. Only been here a week on the transportation network here, um, but I would say that it is a key element to economic development. So to answer your question at the start, is this an economic development piece? And yes, because
More trucks mean more business.
yeah, but also it's quality of life. Certainly, we don't want our streets cluttered with truck traffic and really congested routes. And the alternative to that is the only way to stop getting that is to stop consuming stuff, which we're never really going to do because we're all a growing population here. We're going to have kids and we want our kids to live around us. And if that's going to happen, you're going to have people that are bringing goods and services to you. Um, but there is a smart way to develop that and to do it properly. And I think what we'd like to hear from citizens is if you have input, uh, our emails are available, our phone lines are open. Yeah, we'd love to hear different suggestions and comments. And even if you're not uh, a, a driver of trucks like that, you still have to get places and you want to walk, you want to bike. And so the plan that we talked about yesterday, I think, is a pretty comprehensive look at how we're moving people around the city.
We have a caller, in fact,
Yeah.
with us at the moment. And for those others who are listening today, that telephone number is 736-0300. Travis Rothweiler and Nathan Murray are in the studio with us from the city of Twin Falls. And you're listening to News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Top story with Bill Colley. And you're up next. You're on the air.
Thank you. I live out on South Harrison, and they're building the new junior high right across the street from me on the corner of South Harrison and 3600. I have talked to the state highway people in Shoshone, and about that truck lane that is coming down South Blue Lakes, turns on 3600, goes over to 9375. That connection. They said that it was out of their jurisdiction. I talked to the county, and I'm sorry I don't remember the names of the people, which isn't important, but they said that it was nothing that they could do about it. And so I talked to the city engineer or somebody on the highway department, and half of that 3600 is city and half of it is county. The divides there at Harrison South. But with that new school coming in and the high traffic and kids walking across the road from Skyline Trailer Park, and there's new developments coming in all the time, I couldn't get anybody even concerned about kids crossing a truck lane at 45 mile an hour. And in fact, one of the men said, well, the school will have to build a crosswalk or bus them across the street. And I don't think that's going to happen. I suggested that we push the truck traffic south, and I don't care if it goes clear to Nansou Pa, but we got to get it away from that school zone. What's your
let's have a response.
thinking on
Yeah.
it?
Yeah, I think that that's a valid concern, and the first thing I want to say is I'm sorry for it. Seems like there was this perpetual passing of the buck, that this isn't my responsibility, this is someone else's road. Um, I know that internally we've had conversations with the placement of the new schools and the traffic and the flow of traffic, and to ensure that there are safe routes. We've engaged in conversations with the school district to ensure that, as that school opens up next fall, that there is going to be a safe route, not only to that school, but if you consider that right now individuals who are living in that area may be crossing that road today because they're going to be going up to Oregon Trail, which is an elementary school in that general vicinity as well right now. And so I thank you for the call, and it's certainly know that it's on our radar. I'm not the one with the answers, but I'll make sure that our team is continuing to look at that as we continue to move forward, because our partnership with the school and making sure that students can get safely to school is a priority.
Want to thank him for the telephone call. And again, 736-0300, the telephone number to reach the program today. One thing that we haven't mentioned in some weeks on the program is airport expansion, but as we see more growth out in that direction, I know a member of the council told me about a year ago that going back decades, everyone thought most of the growth in the city would initially happen on the south side, and it was somewhat of a surprise to see the almost organic growth on the north side. But as the airport expands, there's got to be an effort, I would imagine, that's afoot to try to bring people in, because now you're looking at an ability to put up warehouses and other businesses that would be able to take advantage of that expansion.
Yeah, certainly that's a key element. As much as it is a need, it's also kind of a signal that you're a legitimate city that can do business in a lot of different ways. From what I hear, I understand that was one of the things that attracted Giovanni, the ability to fly in a plane and at a certain capacity and get to within their plan in 10 minutes. That was a key driver for them. And it's going to be the same for a lot of other businesses. I know there's some manufacturers in the town that are using the FedEx facility, and that's why you see some expansion there. And as we grow, the airport will have to expand to meet need, but there's still market forces. So,
Yeah, and Nate's absolutely right. One of the things that we're doing is we're going to be doing a utility plan this fall, and we're going to be looking at the types of utilities that are currently available at the airport and the surrounding area, and what are upgrades and improvements that we need to make to be able to grow that area to support the appropriate type of economic growth and development, whether that be that warehouse storage, whether that be continued expansions like you see with FedEx, or it might be some sort of assembly.
I'd also like to hear from anyone who might be listening too about what type of business they would like to see. I mean, within reason. Obviously, there are certain businesses that would not necessarily find a good match here, but it'd be interesting to see if somebody listening today had some thoughts about a direction we could go. Telephone number 736-0300. And the other thing, one of my coworkers drives in every day from out of the Mini-Cassia region, and they are competing with us, obviously, for growth, and they're doing a pretty good job of it, I would guess, from some of the things I've read in newspaper accounts. But is it really a competition, or are we working in an integrated model?
I'd like to think we're being integrated with Twin Falls leading the way in some aspects. I think because we are the major employment center and the bulk of the population's here, uh, we have some tools to bring people to the table because we're going to get hit first with some of those growing pains like transportation. And so if we can right now sit down and be kind of take the lead with some of these other community players, we'd like to fill that role. And I think that just is the rising tide that's going to come.
People, obviously, if you get a job in Twin Falls and you live somewhere else, uh, the people in that community are happy about it. And the same thing here. If you end up getting a job in, let's say, Rupert, and yet you live in Twin Falls, the idea is as long as we keep people employed, we're all better off.
That's absolutely right. And I think that when you look at Twin Falls as a community to people who are coming in from the outside feels a lot bigger than 48,000 people. And in truth, on every single day, we grow to about 70,000. Our heads and beds number with census is about 48, but we also see between 70 and 75,000 people coming into our community every day, whether that be for education, for commerce, for medical care, for tourism, which are critical components of economic development. And what we have found is um, yeah, we want to grow and we want to expand our tax base in a manner that makes sense for Twin Falls, but we also recognize that a proper growth plan in Burley and Jerome and Rupert and Kimberly and the surrounding areas, we will benefit indirectly from their growth and their successes as well. And so when you look at Twin Falls growing, it's also the growth that's occurring around our larger region.
Had a call, or actually a couple of emails earlier this week, and if you can stick around for a few minutes
Yeah.
after the break,
Yeah.
about somebody asking about the fact that we will soon be going to a public transportation system, and maybe is that going to be just in the city level, or will that be in a regional level? Because I think people are curious, number one, about cost, and they're also curious about where it's going to go. And I know I read the other day there's a lot of discussion going on in advance about this, so we can have it ready to go
That's right.
without being caught unawares. We've got a short break, though, coming up first. We've got Nathan Murray. He's the new Director of Economic Development for the City of Twin Falls, as well as City Manager Travis Rothweiler in studio with us this morning on News Radio 1310 KLIX and NewsRadio1310.com. I wanted to mention we have a couple of guests in studio with us today, and they're joining us from Twin Falls City Hall. We have a new Economic Development Director, or Director of Economic Development of the city, named Nathan Murray. Nathan, as we mentioned earlier, is a native of Boise, so he's not a stranger to Idaho,
No.
and probably growing up there, you saw quite a bit of economic development. And of course, Travis Rothweiler, he is the city manager, and they're in studio with us for a few more minutes today. 9:24 right now. Bill Colley with you on Top Story as well on News Radio 1310 KLIX and NewsRadio1310.com. I've had it mentioned a couple of times because I think Meridian had to do this about a year ago, and we saw a newspaper story about it this past week that mentioned the efforts going on locally. But when that 2020 census arrives, it is likely Twin Falls then is going to have at least a bus system, but there's going to be a call for, once you hit that 50,000 mark, public transportation. So we were talking off air. It's not necessarily a requirement, but there are a lot of strings attached, I guess is a good way to put that.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, just different. At least your structure of your funding changes. You move from what's considered rural by definition to sort of metro, and over 50,000 Twin Falls would hit that. And I know there's a lot of maybe hand-wringing a little bit about if we put more buses on an already busy street, that doesn't really help congestion, or cost and paying for this system, and they don't make money, and all those are valid concerns. I think we need to take more of a long-term view. Like, where do we want to be in 30 years? And if we don't start to do something now and take some action, then we're going to be a lot worse off 10, 15 years from now than we are now. So we're trying to be proactive about it, and we don't have all the answers yet. But we hired some smart people. We bring smart people to the table who've done it before, and fortunately, there's a lot of resources out there. So we'd like to get something started
4 years to
system.
plan, though, too. I mean,
Yeah.
you've got an advantage there as well.
Yeah, so we have 4 years right now until the census, and then probably another two before it's certified. And at that point, we're going to be looking at creating a metropolitan planning organization, which is a federally required process. We're going to be looking at public transportation as a potential offset to that. We'll have some potentially enhanced ADA compliance issues. And what's also important, and Nate was talking about this, is that when we shift from the rural to the urban, those rural funds that Trans4 receives currently and other providers receive, they go away because the city of Twin Falls and its community partners are no longer eligible to receive them. And so funding for Trans4 would go away. And then there has to probably be a public response to be able to offer some level of transportation for a thoughtful and growing community. So one of the things that we're doing right now is we're working with our business partners, our industrial partners, our mental health providers, health providers in general, to say, what does this model look like for the future? And there are lots of people that want us to jump into this place today. We found that jumping right in may not be the best answer. We've got two examples of two Idaho cities who jumped immediately right into fixed route transportation, and one currently will tell you right now that they're struggling to make a go of it, and that's Idaho Falls. In fact, the example that we used last week was Idaho Falls has a fixed route system and limited ridership, and it doesn't necessarily do much to move or move public, and like Nate said, just kind of adds to transportation issues. And then there's another city that started down that venture. They became MPO. They had to do public transportation. They started that process. They scrapped their original program, took some time, took a time out, and rebuilt the program, and now it's a little bit successful. So we're also looking at peer cities to say, what did they do right, and what are some of those pitfalls to avoid? And I think the common theme that we're seeing is exercise a little bit of prudence and patience, and then build a program with partners so that you don't have empty buses running throughout the community just following some route blindly.
We have a call with us. Caller, you're on the air at 928 on KLIX. Go ahead.
Yeah, I hope you can hear me because I was having trouble on the phone hearing you guys. But I have a couple of things that I guess I call economic destruction. As the city grows, there certainly is going to be water concerns, and I see several communities that are coming up in the area. They're putting in water wasting things like parkways and such. Very limited resource. Another limited resource is land. Our area is extremely agriculture, and every acre that a city grows takes away from that agricultural base. And I was just wondering if either of these two concerns are being addressed.
You know, we've got about 30 seconds before the break, and then if you want to stick around, we'll talk more about it too following that.
So we can. I think that very quickly I'm going to say yes. Number one, we recognize that water is an incredibly precious resource, and when you're in a desert, you need to find a way to maximize that. So in 2003, the city of Twin Falls used 33.5 million gallons on its peak day. This year, we used less than 25 million gallons on our peak day, and over that period of time, our population has increased 28%. So per capita consumption is down about half, but that said that we probably have some additional work to do. Valuing green lawns is a competing factor with beneficial use of water, and that's going to be a set moving forward. Land infill is probably one of the things that the city needs to look at. We have a water service boundary, and inside that service boundary, we want to make sure that that's where we're concentrating services, not encouraging urban sprawl. And the comp plan calls for preservation of ag land.
We've got more coming up. Travis Rothweiler and Nathan Murray joining us in studio, and we're talking about economic development and growth in Twin Falls. If you can stick around for a few more minutes, they may be able to take more of your telephone calls. I wanted to point out very quickly, we'll get back to our guest in just a moment. We have Nathan Murray. He's the new Director of Economic Development in Twin Falls, and as well as Travis Rothweiler. He is the city manager joining us in studio this morning. I do want to point out, coming up on September 8th, I'm going to be joined in studio by Dr. Christine Pickup, a doctor of audiology at Mott Harrison Audiology in Rupert, and she's been reminding people, she's been studying the research on cognitive health and hearing, and the most recent findings prove that when hearing loss is addressed with hearing aids, the effects of decline are greatly diminished. Hearing is critical for communication, for connection to others, and for overall well-being. Now's the time, she reminds you, to improve your hearing. You can call Mott Harrison Audiology for an appointment, 312-0957. Our guests are answering some questions today from, and somebody brought up the water issue a couple of minutes ago too, as well. And economic development is definitely keyed or tied to water, and if you don't have a lot of it, it can slow development. Um, and that, of all the issues I think the city faces going forward, that is likely going to be the most critical that we deal with, because if we get to a size of 75,000 people in the city itself, and then in the metropolitan area, I think Don Hall told me one time there are projections that say another million people could be settling in the Snake River Valley alone. Uh, those are a lot of people who are showering and drinking every day.
I mean, you look at the history of this valley. I mean, the reason it's called the Magic Valley is someone figured a way to make water essentially flow uphill, and magically this valley sprouted. It's part of the deep history of this area. It's part of the heritage. And as you get to those critical kind of decision-making points, I think that's when innovation happens. Uh, I'm confident that we'll be able to figure some of this stuff out, because again, there are communities a lot bigger than us in the middle of the desert that have done it. It's just a matter of how cost effectively we can do it and what choices we want to make now um, to get there.
Y- and really, the choice is going to start with each individual. Like we were sharing off the air, our wastewater treatment facility right now accepts about 9 million gallons of flow every single day. And our peak day this year of pumping was over 24.5 million gallons. And so there's another 200% of water nearly that is going to some place other than down the drain. And that's going to be sprinkler systems, that's going to be washing cars. And if you could even just find another way to save another 8 million gallons like we did from 2003 to now, um, that allows for additional growth and expansion of our local economy. Now, some of the things that we've been able to do is we have acquired additional water rights that have not been put to beneficial use right now. So we own Sunnybrook Springs, and there's about 22 and a half CFS of water in that spring. It's a single right. Uh, Moving that water into our system is about a $30 million project. And so when you start looking at, we will have the right to be able to pump the water and to acquire the water and to bring it into our community. But we're going to also then have to find the financial resources to be actually able to capitalize on that right that we have. So right now we're looking at how do we maximize our current Blue Lake supply? How do we make sure that our pumping capacities are appropriate? How do we make sure that our draw is um, taking into account the current decline of the aquifer? And so there's a lot of science that goes with our men and women in the water department and our public works team, and they're doing a really, really good job. They also have a water facility plan that's going to help guide us into the future. But it's going to take maybe changing or tweaking some of the value sets that we have as a community, from valuing green lawn to valuing economic output.
There's a house that I noticed when I first moved here, and I was driving out to the falls at my first trip out there to see it. And there's this beautiful house that was off on the left, and I noticed they built the house in the same earth tones of the land around it, and they have sagebrush instead of grass.
Yeah.
And the idea was they just simply said, we're going to build a house and adapt it
Yeah.
to the environment.
Yeah. And I think that you're starting to see some more of that. And I think one of the things that we at the city could do a better job is trying to find a way to incentivize, uh, some sort of zero-scaping approach. And also, I know our public works team and our planning and zoning team have taken a look at gateway arterial standards and taking is there a different approach to different types of landscaping that's acceptable? And you'll find that those areas, they're laying more gravel, they're doing more drip systems, there's less lawn. And it does maybe take a little bit getting used to, but I'd also say that it's a lot less maintenance with the gravel than it is for the weekly mowing and trimming.
Yeah, I
So
wouldn't miss that at all.
yeah,
And we as a city can take the lead on some of those as well. We have parks, we have park strips that we take care of, and if we're being responsible, I think that sends a good signal to the rest of the community.
Before we wrap up, for people, by the way, who'd like to maybe ask another question, have input, what would you recommend they do? We're running out of little time here, but what would you recommend they do? Where do they go? What should they do?
So there they're welcome to call us. All of our phone numbers are either on the website where they can look at the directory. We're also available online. We can send us an email. Stop by and visit us. Maybe we can buy you a cup of coffee and sit down and have a face-to-face conversation, which is probably the most beneficial, where you can continue to build those connections with the citizens we serve.
Want to thank you both for coming by.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Thanks.
And Travis Rothweiler and Nathan Murray, welcome to town.
Thanks.
Thanks.